Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on July 20th, 2026. We're very pleased to be joined for the first time today by Dr. Reza John Vedadi. Reza is an academic researcher and author and has spent the past 12 years directing, producing, and filming over 50 documentaries on West Asian and Muslim identity and culture. Thank you so much for joining us today, Reza.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So before we begin, I just want to remind our audience, if they find this video to be informative, please like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please do become one. So today we're going to focus our discussion on the internal political situation in Iran. And I'd like to start with a statement issued by Iran's Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, on July 18th. There were two aspects of this speech that stood out for me personally. The first was the particularly scathing language that the Supreme Leader used to describe the U.S. government. And I'm just going to put up on the screen a translation provided by Tasnim, the Iranian news agency, of that part of the speech. And what he was quoted as having written is the following. At the same time as this saga of the martyr of Iran, the violation of the great devil's repeated promises regarding the memorandum signed between the presidents of Iran and the United States once again proved to everyone the fact that the signature of the president of the United States is worthless and invalid, and that coercion, totalitarianism, and brutality are inseparable parts of the American creed and profession. Now, on the one hand, it's not at all surprising to hear the Supreme Leader employ language of this nature after what the United States, the crimes it has perpetrated against Iran and its people. But the question that this raises for me, Reza, is, if we had this in the 12-day war, Trump sent, these two shysters, Kushner and Witkoff, to effectively pretend the U.S. was engaged in a good faith negotiation while the United States was plotting a surprise attack. This happened again in the lead up to the Ramadan war, a pretense of good faith negotiations. Then you have the MOU in which the United States violated in every imaginable way. It has now utterly destroyed the MOU. It lies in smoking ruins. And I guess the question I'm asking is, how will the Iranian leadership ever be able to return to the negotiating table again? Wouldn't that be naive in the extreme? Wouldn't there be intense internal political pressure on the leadership to avoid any such negotiations, because nothing that comes out of them could be relied upon?
So with regards to the negotiations and the political system in Iran with regards to the United States, as you visited Iran, and I'm glad you have, because you're one of those who doesn't just talk about place. You go to visit it and you see it in person and you see the people and the system, and then bring that information to the audience. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. And being there, you notice that there's a large diversity of discussions in Iran regarding politics, of how and what's the best way of approaching this situation with the United States and the West. And you have one, so I don't like the way they use hardliners and moderates. This is a terminology that the West tries to apply and add connotations to it. So the way we will describe it is different groups. There's groups who are revolutionary and follow the line of Imam Khomeini and Ayatollah Martyrdom Khamenei, who knew that the nature of the United States government, not necessarily its people, but the government, is to be hegemonic, to rule over people. It doesn't like equals. And we'll see how it even treats the Europeans, a continent that it descended from. So when it comes to Iran, you have group or revolutionary that know that U.S. leadership just wants to dominate every aspect of the world that it has interest in. There's no equal discussion. And sometimes if it tries to use the apparatus or tool of negotiation, it's to achieve its goal of domination still. There's others who were more Western leaning, not necessarily reformist or hardliners, but they actually either educated or have strong connections to the West, United States or Europe or whatever, and they favor a kind of negotiation with the US at any kind of cost. or almost any cost. So these are the two groups that we face in Iran. The group that was elected into parliament, elected into the leadership, President Pezeshkian, his cabinet and his ideology and his kind of mentality leans on the second one, where let's get a negotiation with the United States. And that's why under him, there was so much effort of negotiation, even though we were attacked. Under the Raisi, who falls into the revolutionary camp that says, no, we know what the West is. We'll put conditions to them. If they want to abide by those conditions, then we can have negotiations. And that's why there wasn't that much negotiation during the 2 years of President Raisi's administration in Iran. And so now we are at a stage where the majority of the population, which we'll get to and discuss their ideas and how they see their war and the West now, especially the United States, majority of those people kind of favored a kind of negotiation because they thought war and its outcome would not be successful and support what Iran wants to achieve, which is independence, better economy, a stronger kind of relationship with all other countries that it wants to do trade with, and its place in the world as a major country. And unfortunately, what has happened is, as you said, negotiations, attack, negotiations, and attack again. And this time, not just an attack on the military or some of the infrastructure, but large number of innocent people, school children, the supreme leader, who's not just the leader of Iran, but he was the Marja' Taqlid. Marja' Taqlid is a person of emulation, like as if he's a pope. He's the leader of hundreds of millions of Shias around the world. So you've killed someone in that position, and also the father of the current leader of the revolution, current leader, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei. So you have all of this dynamic going on. And before that, we had about 11 years ago, the JCPOA. This is an agreement that not just UK, Iran and United States came to an agreement with, but it was the France, Germany, UK, Russia, China, major Security Council veto countries, and it was supported by the UN, came to an agreement where Iran will control and have safeguards on its nuclear program, the peaceful nuclear program for energy. And this way, sanctions and so forth will be removed, which never happened. And then Donald Trump left it. So it's proven to the Iranians on a number of times that the signature that Trump or any other president in the United States applies to a document has of no value for Iran and probably many other countries. So now the camp, which is revolutionary and says that the only language the US understands is the language of force and strength, this is what we have to go forward with. So this is the stage that the Iranian government and the people are now with the United States.
Is it your sense that, and I'm sure this is not an easy question for you to address, but is it your sense that a majority of the Iranian population falls into that category of extreme skepticism towards the United States? Because I must tell you, Reza, that certainly was my impression when I was in Iran. I could not find a single person who was enthusiastic about negotiating with the United States. Everybody either scorned the idea openly. This is on camera. They were doing, records. They were doing interviews for public consumption. They either scorned the idea openly, or they rather humbly stated, if the supreme leader feels that that is the appropriate course of action, then I will support it because I support the supreme leader. That was the most enthusiastic endorsement I could get of negotiation. But then again, I did not interact with, millions of Iranians. You may have a better sense of this than I do.
I don't have any polls to go on, but I'll have my kind of the visit to Iran that I had last week, or when it was the funeral we went to. For example, the majority of the people I read spoke to from taxi drivers to whoever I met, not necessarily being either too religious or too really extreme supporter of the government. However, they were angry with the West in the sense that what the West has done to Iran. So the war and the devastation that's imposed, the suffering regarding, like, for example, sanctions and the increase in prices of medication and everything that impacts everyday life, they are unhappy and angry about. And so their anger has diverted from blaming. At some point, they used to blame Ayatollah Khamenei, and I would have this discussion with the taxi driver, whoever I was having engagement, I said, okay, so you know that Ayatollah Khamenei doesn't get involved in the administration of the country. That's the president that you elected or whoever's elected, and the parliament. These are the ones who write up the legislation, and it's the executive branch who's actually administering, good or bad, corruption, no corruption. That's the administration side. It's nothing to do with Ayatollah Khamenei or his position in the constitution. And so now that attention has been taken away from blaming him or that level of leadership and bringing it onto the United States imposing war and it's with the blockade and so forth and so on. But there are those who still just anti-government in whatever sense. But majority of people have realized, and I believe the new leader, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, has made it clear in his comments that Dr. Pezeshkian, who's the president of Iran, his approach to the negotiations is different to mine. He has stated this openly. However, Dr. Pezeshkian confirmed that he would abide by Iran's red lines, so he was permitted to go and negotiate. So what Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, like his father, is saying is that my advice is there's no point negotiating, which we've seen. But if you do go to negotiate, we have some red lines. If you abide by those red lines, then me as the leader who has to safeguard the red lines of the country in the constitution, give you permission to go and speak. Now, that doesn't mean he endorses the negotiations or the discussions, but he allows it to take place. And this is really important. I used to wonder, why did Ayatollah Khamenei allow this to happen in the previous 37 years? Ayatollah Khamenei, after 37 years, he had inherited a country who was at war for 9 years. So it was difficult to build the institutions as such under Imam Khomeini. When the war finished, he was able to maturize the country. And what I mean by that is we were a monarchy before, right? 1979. There were no major institutions. Everything was run by the king and his courtiers, right? Then it came to a point where the revolution happened. And since then till now, under Ayatollah Khamenei and Imam Khomeini, what they did was they encourage departments, ministries, and so forth, governments that come, institutions, to try to manage each part of their portfolio. And if they made mistakes, they were allowed to make mistakes to help them mature, to become a mature, democratic country that the citizens participate in the running of the country. And that's why when the leadership was killed and different various leadership, Larijani and other people were martyred, it was easy for other people to come up because they weren't reliant on 1, 2, or 5 individuals to run the country. So this is one of the greatest strengths of Ayatollah Khamenei, was to help the country mature and see their own mistakes and learn from their own mistakes. And this is, I believe, the same line that Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei is continuing, is allowing sometimes mistakes within boundaries that does not harm Iran too much to take place, as long as then the governments or the citizens are learning. And that's what's happened now. And that's why during the funeral, if you remember, previously in demonstrations in Iran, it used to be just the Iranian flag. But during the funeral, the people's anger had come to such a point that you started seeing the red flag, which was the flag of revenge and vengeance. And we can discuss what that actually means for Iranians necessarily. So now they've come to a point where they're, even within a few months, we've seen the maturity of the Iranian citizens not kind of being fooled by the idea of negotiations, trying to, provide some sanction relief or asset relief for Iran, in return getting the Strait of Hormuz open and other kind of tricks of trade that the United States wants to use on Iran.
And what do you understand the current Supreme Leader's red lines to be?
I believe that he would be following his father's red lines in many of them. We don't know about the nuclear issue. He hasn't stated anything, but for now, the previous fatwa and red line stands. So there's no nuclear, no aim to have nuclear weapons. But regarding to lack of trust of the United States, well, you already read the statement. We know that he doesn't trust the United States as far as he can throw them. And with many other things, I think time will show. We have to bear in mind there was the 45 days of war, and there's the threat of his, again, assassination, killing, by the US and Israelis and possibly other countries. And so we have to bear in mind that one of the reasons why he's not coming out and giving full speeches in person as such, one of them is out of security and safety. So for us to find out what his full vision for Iran will be, will take some time. However, what I suggest from the discussions I've had, from what I've seen from Iran so far, is that what the United States war did to Iran was to re-energize the revolutionary movement that existed in 1979, that removed the monarchy, and after a few decades had become stale because the people had lost vision or whatever. Now it's as if it's been charged up, energy drink has been poured into it, or gasoline, or whatever you want to say, and now it has a strong energy boost. And I think in the next few years we'll see a new version of the revolution that we hadn't seen before, because Iran, if it's second part of this stage of the revolution, has institutions that are already working towards that direction. It doesn't have to create and establish new institutions after the monarchy and that revolution. So it's in a better position and it's more independent. As you were there, you see that, a lot of the cars that are used in Iran are Iranian made. If you go to the supermarket, you may get access to foreign brands, maybe like from Turkey or whatever, or Nestle, but you also have all Iranian brands that make alternatives. So Iran is a good position, much better position than it was in 1979. But how it acts in the next few years and what kind of pressure it has from the West, especially the United States, that would be an important key factor to look for.
Now, a few minutes ago, you referred to the red flag that was quite visible at these funeral processions. I'm going to show our audience a brief clip from the fourth day of the 7-day funeral program. This is when the Supreme Leader's, the martyred Supreme Leader's coffin was carried aloft a truck through central Tehran. And here's some of what I saw on that day. Now, that was just at the very beginning of the procession that day. It became far, far larger, but you could see even there how prevalent that red flag was. Could you talk to us about that, Reza? What was that intended to communicate?
So what you were showing was interesting because when I was there, a lot of friends had gone to the part of Iran called Maidun Enqilab, the Square of Enqilab, Square of Revolution. And they had been waiting there since early morning. And then news came through WhatsApp and other means that the crowd is so much in that part of Tehran that where you saw the truck, it had not turned that way and had turned another direction to avoid the large amount of citizens who wanted to visit the leader. So when people complain about, oh, is this AI or is this footage from another occasion and so forth and so on, there's so much footage that demonstrates that the millions had come just in that day that you're talking about. And so this idea of red flag, what does it mean? Where does it come from? What's some of the roots of it within Iranian culture? I'm pretty sure your guests are quite intelligent. I've seen your show. But just a quick reminder, Iran is a majority Muslim country with a minority of Christian, Jews, Zoroastrians as well. Out of that majority, there is a predominantly majority. So out of 96, 7% Muslim, you could say there's 90% who are Shia. Shia are the followers of Imam Ali, companion of the Prophet. And then you have Sunnis, who are the majority of Muslims around the world. They account for about 80% of the Muslim population. Within Shia Islam, the grandson of the Holy Prophet was martyred about 40, 50 years after the Holy Prophet passed away by the leader of that time. So his name was Yazid. And so we say that Trump is the Yazid of this time because he was a tyrant and he killed a person who stood up to justice, such as Ayatollah Khamenei. And so this idea of sacrifice and martyrdom comes from many places, one of it even within Christianity with Jesus Christ, but within Islam, because it's a Muslim country, it's come from Imam Hussein. Then from that, we have the concept where Shia Islam has two wings. One is martyrdom and sacrifice for justice, and one is hope for eventual justice. So Imam Hussein represents sacrifice for justice, and Imam Mahdi, who's the last savior, the last imam that we have within Islam, and this is all Muslims now, he comes at the same time as Prophet Jesus to bring justice to the world where there's injustice. Together they will unite the Muslims and the Christians, and then they'll bring justice. So we as Shia have a strong faith that the Mahdi is currently alive and can see all the world events that are happening, and he's waiting for permission to show himself, just as we believe that Jesus is alive and he will come back as well. So this idea of justice and sacrifice, an idea of hope and justice. And so the red flag represents that what was sacrificed, which was Ayatollah Khamenei and his family and his granddaughter and daughter and daughter-in-law and his son-in-law, will be avenged by the hope that, you know, it could be either the Imam Mahdi will come to avenge his justice, or God through other means. Because don't forget, Iranians, a lot of them, even if they're not religious on a daily basis, say wearing hijab or praying, most of them have this idea of faith in God and within Islam. And we saw this a lot during the funeral, where people who were not really abiding by hijab, but they said, we love Agha, they were referring to Ayatollah Khamenei, saying that we love him and we realize that he truly loved us and sacrificed himself and his family for us. So now we want to come and show our respect to him, even though we're not necessarily that religious, but we love our country, we love our leader. So there's been a transcendent transaction between his martyrdom and the response from people within Iran who are not necessarily religious and outwardly look like they follow the leader like that. So this red flag represents that justice will prevail. And when I say vengeance, or the leader will be avenged, that doesn't mean that, you know, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, whose son, who's the leader, will write a, you know, like a note to the Secret Service of Iran, who will then go to the United States or hire someone in the United States to try and poison or assassinate Trump or the other people that are responsible for the death and destruction in Iran. But what he said in his statement, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, is that the free people of the world and all those who have been impacted by American foreign policy and injustice, such as Venezuela and Cuba and so many other countries, they all have a hand in the vengeance that will come. And what does it mean by vengeance? Vengeance doesn't mean necessarily, oh, we killed Trump and it's done. No, it could be the downgrading of the US dollar, of US hegemony, US military power projection, which for most of the world is more valuable than killing a head of state. Because if you kill one president, there's no problem. The deep state will put another president in his place and do the bidding of the deep state. So when they say vengeance, they mean this apparatus that is able to commit crimes and oppression around the world, that needs to be weakened. And when that is weakened, a form of justice is brought back and vengeance is. So the red flag has this kind of connotation to it. But for some people in Iran, it actually literally means assassinating someone or a specific group of people.
We know who's at the top of that list. In any case, at least
not that we approve of any kind of violence on this show or any other
correct,
show.
Absolutely. We're not encouraging any such thing. We're simply observing sentiments on the ground.
We're just commentators on politics.
Correct. So I mentioned at the outset there were two aspects of the Supreme Leader's July 18th speech that struck me. One was the scathing language about Trump, the untrustworthiness of its regime. But there was also a quite powerful call for unity. And again, this is from Tasnim News, summarizing, translating that portion of the Supreme Leader's speech. And I'm quoting, "It is necessary to tell you, the loyal and the proud people of Iran, that among the most fundamental issues at this time is insisting on the unity of the word and holy unity at all levels of the people and officials in all fields to achieve the lofty ideals of the Islamic Revolution and secure the honor and independence of dear Iran, especially against the criminal and cunning American enemy." As it has been repeatedly emphatically pointed out before, protecting unity and avoiding divisions and conflicts, political differences, and highlighting social differences is everyone's duty. And of course, the role of officials in carrying and loving elements of the revolution and the imam and martyr leader in the cohesion and integration of the country is more important and sensitive. So this emphasis on unity could be interpreted as concern in the mind of the supreme leader that the country is becoming unduly or dangerously fractious at this moment. And that is certainly a narrative that we hear it as in the West, right? We hear there's so much infighting, you don't really know who is in charge. One day you're being told Iran's government is willing to do a deal. The next day they pull out of negotiations. That's the narrative. How do you interpret this commentary from the supreme leader at this time? Do you think that the danger of disunity has become severe in Iran, or do you think that for the most part the population remains unified behind the government?
So there's a few aspects to this question, which is a very, very important question, because this question impacts the outcome of the future of Iran, and thus the region and the greater, wider impact in the world. The Iranians, no matter what their political or religious affiliated background ideology is, has their character where when it's under threat, such as the 1980s war with Saddam, no matter what the internal dynamics is, when there's an external pressure or external threat, they unite. They will unite majority and they will defend their country. Once that, battle is over, then they can have internal discussions again. But coming to the warning that Ayatollah Said Mujtaba has given, this is something that his father reminded Iranians over many decades. So it's not that Iran is facing any kind of fracture. Complete opposite, I would say, from the discussions I've had with my friends in Iran. They're saying that the people who were supporting the idea of negotiations have realized their mistake. And those who promoted the kind of stronger, harsh, powerful face or response to the United States hegemony are the ones who are rising in their argument. The arguments are becoming stronger. And the majority of the population is leaning to that side. And this, it's not a warning, but this advice that Ayatollah Said Mujtaba has given is the same as his father has been giving for 20 years, that the strength of Iran is within its unity. And we've seen that a number of times. If you remember, Qasem Soleimani was martyred, millions came out in the streets. If you remember, Shahid Raisi, Ayatollah Raisi, the president, he died in circumstances which, were suspicious. Millions came out again. The riots that took place in January this year, only 6 months ago, when that was the terrorist activities, when that was quashed, you saw millions come out again. And every year, for the past 47 years, we have had annual peaceful protest in support of the government during February, which is the anniversary of the revolution. And this doesn't happen in any other country. We had the French Revolution, no one came out in support of the government for many years, or the Russian Revolution, or Cuban, or any other revolution. So this is unique to Iran. So this is not a warning that the enemy. Let's put it like this: what this advice Ayatollah Khamenei is giving is not a kind of he's giving advice, but it's not a warning that something like this is happening. And so what the Western the Zionist media do is utilize these kind of advices and say, oh look, there's a rift between them, something's gone wrong. And so, as I said earlier, we go back to the same technique that his father used. He would advise the government of the time, if you want to go negotiate, my advice is not to do that. However, I won't stop you, but I'll put parameters to safeguard the country's nation. And one of those was, if you remember previously, when they wanted to negotiate, the Americans said, let's negotiate in UAE. Iran, under Ayatollah Khamenei's advice, said, no, go to Oman. Oman is a more neutral country. They wanted to negotiate directly with Iranian negotiators, face to face, in one room. Ayatollah Khamenei said, no, you can negotiate, but it has to be a go between you. And one of the reasons was, if it's face to face, every time the United States would leave that discussion, they would make up their own version of what happened. But now, every time they would leave, we had someone who's neutral, such as the Omani foreign minister. He would have documents, literally documents, proving what the negotiations were being said, and it would be more difficult for the Americans to try and twist it. So this idea of unity works within a kind of a framework for the government to be able to administer its views as much as it can, but within the parameters of the red lines that the Ayatollah Moshtaba Khamenei, whose actual job role in the constitution is to prevent major kind of damage to the Iranian foreign policy or Iranian country. So these differences within Iran are not something that I think supporters of Iran need to worry about. I think from my discussions with Iranians in Iran, they say that those who were pro-negotiations, pro-trying to come some kind of a deal with America have become a little bit more aware of the situation, that America can't be trusted. They're not pushing that agenda as much. And whenever you saw, for example, that MOU taking place, it wasn't just in the benefit of the United States so it could rearm and have its World Cup and then there's no problems and then, control their oil market. It was also for the benefit of Iran. Within that two-month space, it has increased its capabilities militarily. It has managed to sell 100 million barrels of oil. It has managed to try and at least stabilize the economy, because don't forget, Iran was under 47-year sanction. The war takes place. There's more pressure on Iran. So Iran is not just dealing with a foreign nuclear power that is trying to defend Iran in. It's also trying to maintain stability in Iran and control the currency devaluation, trying to control the economy, trying to control certain basic requirements and products that need to come in, wheat, flour, so forth and so on. So Iran is a big country. It's not a small country, and it needs to manage all of these things. And so sometimes, even myself, I would be like, wouldn't it be better if you continued fighting to completely destroy the enemy? But then on the other hand, you say, okay, well, there's certain information that government ministers and government heads have that maybe it was required for them to have some kind of not ceasefire, but ceasing of hostilities, so that certain aspects of Iranian, maybe gaps in its military or its economy, could be filled. But at the moment, there isn't a lack of unity. Iranians are united. There may be different discussions within that unity, but they all see that the United States cannot be trusted.
So I'd like to close out our discussion by shifting from the internal political situation to talking about the Iranian diaspora in the West. And it's just quite a thing to behold. I had no direct, well, no, let me correct that. I had direct interaction with the Iranian diaspora in Canada, quite extensive, actually.
I saw one of the videos.
Yeah, but this is the first experience that I had of the Iranian diaspora. These were people who were associated with an organization called the Iranian Canadian Congress, which opposes the sanctions on Iran, wants Canada to reestablish diplomatic relations, and takes a very moderate line in terms of non-interference in Iran's politics and so forth. And my experience of the people at the ICC, the Iranian Canadian Congress, is they're not particularly conservative in their outlook. In fact, some of them, quite a few of them, I would characterize as secular and progressive. And although certainly some of them are religiously conservative. So that was my complete and utter experience of the Iranian diaspora until this criminal war of aggression was launched. And all of a sudden, Reza, these huge protests, they were quite large protests by Canadian standards, started popping up in major Canadian cities. And the coverage, the media coverage of those protests was that they were 100% opposed to the Iranian government, and the people were clamoring for the overthrow of the Islamic Republic. So I decided to go into one of those protests. Actually, I did this 2 or 3 times, and I want to show you and my audience a clip from an organizer of one of those protests in Montreal. This happened about 6 months ago, and it was just a few kilometers from where I'm sitting now. So have a listen to this, and then I'll ask you to comment on this.
Your name is?
My name is Eric.
Eric, nice to meet you, Eric.
Nice to meet you,
So
Dimitri.
I understand from the young lady that you have some sort of organizational responsibility.
Exactly.
So are you one of the organizers?
I am.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions for
Yeah,
you.
sure.
What I heard, and I've only been here for 10 minutes, so
Uh-huh.
I heard a lot of what I understood to be support for the son of the Shah.
That's right.
And I have two questions for you about this. Do you believe that the Shah's son, in light of the record of the Shah and so forth, is going to bring democracy to Iran?
Well, he has been the only person who has been fighting for democracy in Iran for like over 40 years. He has been asking us to be democratic and support that the democracy, and he was just reminding us every year that this is not what Iran and Iranians deserve. So we have seen him going out, having many meetings with lots of politicians all around the world. Don't forget that he was exiled, and still he was doing whatever he could for Iran. Going, talk to everyone in Europe, in North America, in Asia. Like he's been doing whatever he could do. And this time that you see that they're shutting down the internet, it's because all of the people are calling him all around Iran, like Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Zahedan, Baluchistan, Mazandaran, Khorasan, all of the districts and like everywhere in Iran, because he summoned us. Right. He asked us to go on the streets, stop working, like go on a strike and do whatever you do to defend yourself, to defend your rights. And like if he could just summon us, all of us, and like millions of people on the streets of Iran, and they're calling his name, I think he's the only one we have.
And I think you've seen that the Trump administration and the Israeli government have expressed a lot of support for the.
Yeah.
Does that concern you? Do you think the Trump administration and Netanyahu want democracy and human rights for the people of Iran?
Let me tell you something. We have never been like asking others to help us. Okay, like for us, the only thing we're like not directly. We're asking them if you don't want to be with people, just don't be with the Islamic Republic. That's a big help. That's a big hope. But still, the baby Netanyahu, Israel, like he has been like his government and himself. They have been the only people who have been supporting people of Iran on the streets.
Okay, I can't bear to listen to this anymore. This is
the one I watched of you. I thought, wow, you're really patient, or you have no idea what's going on, and you're just trying to learn.
Well, I was fighting my teeth the whole time. It got worse at this point. You may recall he actually claimed that the Palestinians in Gaza were faking their own death and suffering. I mean, this is lunacy. And believe me, Reza, when I was walking it through the crowd in central Montreal to get to this character and to interview him, I did interview some others. All I heard was the chanting of the name of Pahlavi. That's all I heard. And there were Trump signs and there were Netanyahu banners, and it was just absolutely sickening. And this continued after. This was just before the Ramadan war, this interview. But I went to another one in Ottawa, the nation's capital, after the bombing began, after the Minab school massacre, and they were saying the same things. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Please explain to us this idea that, the people all around Iran were coming into the streets because the Shah's son summoned them to do so. I saw absolutely nothing on my 2 trips to Iran this year. I saw not one iota of support for the Shah's son, not even from people who were critics of the Islamic Republic. So please, could you explain to us what is wrong with these people? How do they come to hold these views? How do they stand with the aggressors and the oppressors of the Iranian people at this critical moment in the country's history?
So just to give a quick background for the audience, before 1979, Iran was ruled by the Pahlavi monarchy. So Mohammad Reza. His father came into power around the 1920s, but he didn't come into power, sorry. He took power with the UK assistance from the Qajar dynasty, who were around for 250 years. And previously, the Qajar dynasty gave parts of Iran, which was Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, under a treaty of 150 years to Russia. So they gave land away from Iran, vast swaths of land. Then the Pahlavi came in. Pahlavi comes in with the UK support. He kind of centralizes the government, and he runs this whole modernization program, like the Ataturk from Turkey. However, in 1941, the British think that he may be somewhat leaning towards the Germans, the Nazis, and maybe going to give them oil or something. So they order him to abdicate. So a sovereign country of Iran abdicated in the middle of the night, left in a car, went to Africa because the British told him to. So his son comes into power when he's 18. In 1945, when the Allies and the Soviets win against the Germans, Stalin, Churchill, I think it was Roosevelt, they meet in Tehran to have a summit of how the future they're going to plan everything after Germany. They hadn't advised Mohammad Reza Pahlavi that they're coming to the country to have the meeting. And when he finds out in Tehran and he wants to join the summit, they close the door on him and say, you stay out of the palace. So this was the state of our country under the monarchy at the beginning. Time passes, 1953, a democratically elected member of parliament becomes prime minister, Mossadegh. He nationalizes our oil. He goes, why are we only getting 10 or 15% of the revenue or the profits of the sale of oil from our country, from the United Kingdom, when this is our oil and we need the money to build hospitals and schools and universities? So he nationalizes the oil. The British don't like that. They sanction Iran, blockade Iran with their military, and under the Ajax coup, codename Ajax, the UK, the United Kingdom, MI6 and CIA under US committed coup d'etat, have Mossadegh removed, and Pahlavi had run away from Iran, comes back. So this is the first time he runs away from Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Then in 1979 again, he runs away. He doesn't stay. He runs away, takes billions, takes his son Reza Pahlavi that wants to become king, whose family barely speak Farsi. His daughters barely speak Farsi. They're all married non-Iranians. And he stated on PBD, the Patrick Bet-David program, that he goes, all my friends are in the US. My family's in the US. With Zoom, you don't have to be in the country. So he wants the country and its 90 million people to be his subjects, and wants to rule them by Zoom or by Skype. So this is the kind of people that you're dealing with, okay? Mm-hmm. Then 1979 happens. Imam Khomeini comes, establishes a referendum. People vote for the Islamic Republic constitution by 98%. That comes in, and we have elections. For the first time, every a few years, there's elections of parliament, there's elections of president. Even the leader who becomes, the leader we have right now, he's elected by a body that is directly elected by the citizens. They vote in 80 jurists, highly respected jurists, scholars. These scholars then choose someone who becomes the leader. So the whole of Iranian system has participation of the people, checks and balances. No one, try to abuse the system. No one is a monarch, so forth. So they want all of these democratic institutions that have been established to be removed, for this Reza Pahlavi to come in, who hasn't lived in Iran for 47 years, and then he somehow is going to make it more democratic than it is. Well, at the moment, you were in Iran, okay? You saw women with hijab and you saw women without hijab, okay? So the issue of hijab is sorted, right? People can walk about without hijab. We have women who are in parliament, and we have women who are in the government. So we have women who are teachers, women who are head of universities. I think Professor Marandi, a number of times he goes, the head of my department, or the person I answer to, is a woman. So the idea that women have no rights in Iran, that's nonsense now. You can put that aside. The idea of freedom of speech. You were in Iran, you saw how many people probably criticized Iran in previous trips, not maybe now because they're really, psyched up about the war, and so they're pro-Iranian. But previously, if you had been, people would have complained about government and, corruption. You don't have that in the countries that are in the Middle East or in West Asia. You complained about anything like that in Saudi Arabia or other countries, you disappear. So there's that freedom of discussion in Iran as well, elections, women's rights. So what is it these people that want to bring that we don't have in Iran? What they want to remove is the government that is support of Palestine against US hegemony and against Zionist expansionism. And so they want to remove that. And the hat that he had that said MIGA, M-I-G-A, has to let people realize that these are the same people who are groomed the way the MAGA movement in the US was groomed, Make America Great Again. And it's all by these Zionist groups and lobbies and think tanks that think, how can we brainwash people to hate the other, hate this specific group of people? Why? Because they support Palestine, because they are anti-Zionism. So this is where it comes from. A lot of these people that you see in California and other places that were, you know, congregating and being happy about the death and destruction of innocent Iranian schoolgirls and citizens, a lot of them are children of the people who fled in 1979 because they were directly benefiting from Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's rule. So when they fled and they took a lot of the money with them and they, you know, started living in the US or even in Europe, they would then have children. So if 100,000 fled, each of them had 2 or 3 kids, and they had grandkids, you're almost at, you know, 400,000 or 500,000 people who could be hating Iran, who've never visited Iran. They have no connection to Iran. Some of them don't even speak proper Farsi. Mm-hmm. And then you have another group, which is the MEK, Mujahideen Khalq. Now, these are groups within Iran who were a cross creation of social communist and Shia ideology. This Mujahideen Khalq were very much anti-America and Pahlavi. When the revolution happened and Imam Khomeini came and he tried to standardize everything in the sense that peaceful participation and no more force and violence be used, because the revolution had taken place now, people have to participate through politics, they started to use the same violence that we saw in January, where they will go and stab and shoot and attack institutions and individuals all around Iran and Tehran to put fear into Iranians so they could do a counter-revolution and take the government by force. And so a lot of them fled, went to Iraq. In Iraq, they supported Saddam during the 8-year war against Iran. So they acted as saboteurs on the Saddam's army, and they had a base there, if you remember, until 2003 when the Americans came and captured Iraq. They were then moved from there to Albania. So there's also a small group of people outside of Iran who have, for example, John Bolton, Pompeo, you know, they put him on the payroll to come and speak at their conferences. They have a lady called Mariam Rajavi who wears a scarf, and she speaks, and she lives in France and between France and Europe and sometimes America or Canada. They also have a small following of maybe a few 100,000 people, but they're quite extreme as well. Like they in their ideology, they're allowed to use violence to achieve means. When I say violence, I mean burning people, killing people, assassinating people, stabbing people. And so these are the two major kind of groups that are anti-Iranian and funded and supported by the CIA and the Zionist lobbies to try to be used to put pressure on Iran. Maybe amongst, other than these, you'll find some intellectuals who may be anti-Islamic Republic, but they're not as extreme as these two. They're more independent. You know, they're like probably, they don't want the monarchies to come in. They don't want the Mujahideen Khalq to come in. They just want the Islamic Republic not to have the Velayat al-Faqih, the Islamic system, become a republic. Okay, which is not much difference to what it is now, just a republic, not Islamic Republic. But if you look at them, how can you compare 40 million people that came for the procession of, let's minus 6 million for the Iraqis, let's say 35 million came. 35 million are not represented in Western media. However, the few 100,000 that come, not necessarily maybe all Iranian, just maybe people who come to participate, Americans, white, Ukrainian, whatever, they are somehow become representative of Iranians. And this is one of the reasons why shows like yourself and other shows that we watch are important, because you break this narrative that is supported, funded, and created by the Zionist lobby to try and show Iran, this group of California, Beverly Hills people represent the Iran of the in the West Asia, which is not true.
Mhm.
By the way, most of these people are welcome to go back. They will have no problem going back. No one would cause them any hassles.
Right. They don't even represent the diaspora, because, as I said at the outset of this part of our discussion, I had extensive and continue to have extensive interactions with Iranian Canadians who are utterly opposed to the Trump regime, Israel, and the Shah's son, and are fierce critics of Western foreign policy towards Iran. Those people, however, in the Canadian and other Western corporate media are disappeared. If you hear from them at all, and rarely will you ever hear from them in the corporate media, they are described as being pro-regime and being fringe and not representing the diaspora. So to be candidly, my motivation in going down this path with you is I really want people to understand that those voices you hear, these extremists, I regard them as fascists, just outright fascists. These people are not even remotely representative of Iran today, and they're not even representative of the Iranian diaspora, in my opinion. But in any case, I really want to thank you.
You're right. You're right. There's a large number who are not extreme like them. So I think that's also important. That, like you mentioned, that I think that's an important point that I missed. That they not only not a representative of Iranians in Iran, but they're not a representative of the majority of the Iranians who live outside, who may not necessarily support the Islamic Republic, but they don't go as far as these guys who become anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, fascistic, all of these things that you mentioned, just so that they can remove the Islamic Republic and implant their Zionist stooge like Reza Pahlavi.
Yeah. And the people in the Iranian diaspora who are opposed to Trump and Netanyahu and the Shah's son, candidly, a lot of them are afraid to speak out. It is dangerous and perilous to criticize Western foreign policy towards Iran if you live in a Western country. I've seen many of them get vilified, even threatened openly with violence on social media, and they tell me, we're very concerned about going public. So
I think there was a gentleman who was stabbed in Germany. He was Afghan. He wasn't even Iranian, but because he didn't want to support the Pahlavis, put a flag in his shop, the Pahlavis flag. He was stabbed, and they act like the brown shirts of the Nazis of the 1930s, where if you don't support the fascist movement and the socialist fascist movement, whatever it was, you're going to be targeted. Your windows are going to be broken of your shop. So put this flag up, or you're going to be harassed online. And we even saw someone like this Canadian lady, Goldie Gamari, or whatever her name is. She openly on Piers Morgan threatened Professor Marandi, but nothing would happen to her. Now, if I, God forbid, had threatened anyone on social media or even on a major platform like Marandi, the next day the cops will be at my house and I'll be taken away for terrorism. So they also have been given a leeway by the deep state within Western countries, UK, Canada, and America, and Germany, and these countries, to be used as a tool to put pressure on Iran. But I guarantee you, once this the use of them as a tool has been finished, they will be discarded quicker than they can imagine. So they think by acting like this and acting as a tool for the Zionist lobby and regime and the deep state, somehow they're safe. But they don't realize that that's not how the deep state and the Zionists work. They use you as a tool. Once they finish with you, they will discard you. And when they discard you, by then it's too late. So you sold your soul and your country, so you feel uncomfortable to go back there. And then you can't stay in the country that you are because you've been brainwashed into having a specific worldview that is incompatible with where you are as well now. So they're actually causing problems for themselves without, my advice to them is, look, just sit back, have a critical mind, and think, why are you so angry towards the Islamic Republic? What's happened? I had an interaction with one of them once outside the Iranian embassy in London. And I'd gone for the condolence last year, a June attack, to visit the embassy, and I come out, and he's one of those professional agitators who stands there, videos, puts it on his social media, and he was arguing with me. I thought, you know what? Instead of running away from him or shouting at him, I said, let's have a discussion. Tell me, why are you so upset? What has happened to you in Iran that caused you to have so much anger towards Iran and the Islamic Republic and all this? Let's put everything aside. Let's put politics aside. Forget who I am. Let's forget all that stuff. Just tell me what's happened to you, that there must be a reason why you. So anyway, we had this discussion back and forth, too much to the point where he gave up on me and he walked off because he had no content. He had no argument to give.
Right.
You know, some of these are traumatized, and because of the trauma they're projecting onto other Iranians, I wanted to genuinely find out what that trauma was. But it comes to the point where, like, me and you, we can sit and talk to anyone who has a different view to us, and we can have a civil discussion, even if we completely disagree, and we can go on and keep bringing arguments because our worldview is based on facts and how the world has shifted in history. Their worldview isn't based on facts. Somehow you think Reza Pahlavi will come back and all the financial problems, economic problems in Iran is going to be resolved? Are you out of your mind? Look what happened to Libya. Look what happened to Syria. You think they care about us more than they care about those ones? They don't. It's going to get worse. They'll carve out the part of Iran that has all the oil, and then they'll give that to some guy who answers to them. And next thing you know, Iran is going to be split up into 5-6 countries. And if you want to go from one part to another, you need a visa.
Precisely.
So
their goal
this
is
is fact of reality that they can't comprehend.
Right, right. I can't stress it enough. To me, it's quite clear that their goal is the destruction of the Iranian nation. It isn't even regime change. They don't care what regime is in power. They want to destroy the country. And I to this very day flabbergasted that anybody who claims to be Iranian could support these genocidal monsters. But such is the world in which we live. You can find this in any society, by the way. We can find this in Greek society. I'm a Greek, and there are people in our society who support, the most anti-Greek elements in Western politics. Anti-Greek in the sense that they're looking for the country's destruction, the weakening of the country, the theft of the country. So this is not a problem that's confined, sadly, to one particular people. In any case, it's been a great pleasure speaking with you, and I hope we can continue the conversation in the future.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. It's been lovely.
And we're signing off today from Montreal, Canada on July 20th, 2026.